In this video, I'm just going to continue with some more complicated examples of domain and range for different functions. So this is example 5, and basically the function is this red line over here. So in case you can't read it, it's, for example, the x value for this point is -2, the y is -1. For this high point over here, the x is 1, the y value is 4. And then for this final point over here, the x value is 5, and the y value is 3. This is, of course, not to scale, but it's just to illustrate how to determine domain and range for different functions. All right, so make sure you copy that down. And by looking at this function, one thing is implied. So here we don't see open circles or closed circles, but if you don't see, for example, over here, if you don't see an open circle, you can safely assume, for example, that over here, this is a closed circle. I don't need to show you a closed circle. I only need to show you if it's an open circle, meaning that it's not included. But here, if nothing's shown, you can safely assume that it is included. So here, this is included, this is a closed circle, so it is included, and this is also a closed circle, so that is included. All right, so again, our goal here is to determine what the domain and range is for this function. And by the way, for this example and the following two examples, we're going to use something very, very similar, but what I'm going to change is I'm going to change some of these closed circles to open and see how that changes the domain and range. All right, so anyways, let's start with this. So first, let's draw sort of a line of possibilities. So I'm just going to draw a horizontal line over here. I'm going to make that yellow. So I'm going to draw a horizontal line over here. Remember, this just helps me determine the domain and range. That's all I'm drawing it for, okay? And so by looking at this function, the lowest value on this function is -2. And actually, let me use a different color because I think blue is it doesn't really help us take a look at it. I'm gonna use red. Okay, so the lowest value here is -2, right? And I'm gonna put a closed circle here because, hey, we include that. Now, as I move to the right, I don't see any breaks or anything like this. All the x values are contained over here. Even if I go to 1 over here, I can see that's like, I guess, a jump. There's sort of a change in slope here. But again, that is also included. And if I go to number 5 here, that is also included. So it's basically included everywhere from -2 to 5. So even though there's that 1, it really doesn't make a difference because it's like a nice smooth transition from -2 to 5. So that's my domain, from -2 to 5. Now let's look at the range. So my lowest value possible is 1. So I'm going to put a closed circle there because that's included. And I can go up here, and then the next value that I see, if I'm just looking in the y values, is 3. And so let me just put 3, and that's a closed circle as I put over there. And let's look at 4. So there's 4 over here, and so I put 4 over there. So once again, it's everything basically from 1 to 4. So I'm gonna shade that, and the 3 doesn't really matter because it's basically like it's as if I can just sort of draw a smooth line from 1 to 4. The 3 just happens to be part of it because this 3 here can also exist for this 3 over there. So what is the domain and range? So oops, let me use green. I think that'll be a bit easier to see. So if I use D, so here we go. So X is element of reals. So it's always important to put that because it's a nice smooth line. There aren't like discrete units. It's not like -2, -1. It's everything between -2 and 5. So it's from -2, and I'm going to include it. So therefore, I got to put this little equal sign, and then X, and then all the way so from -2 to 5, right? So that's my domain. And what about my range? So it's Y is element of reals, and I'm going to impose a restriction that's from 1 to 4. So it's 1 less than or equal to y, which is less than or equal to 4, and there we go. I have my domain and range for this example. All right, so I'm going to go to the next example. Again, the function is going to look very, very similar, but the issue is now that I have an open circle at -2 and I have an open circle at 5. And like I said before, even though I haven't said it, you can safely assume that because I haven't included it, this is a closed circle. So you don't have to put that, but if that helps you understand things, then go for it. But remember, if it's an open circle, then that has to be declared if you are declaring it. So again, I'm going to draw sort of a horizontal line just to help me determine my domain. And I'm going to draw a vertical line to help me determine my range. So let's go here. So my domain, so my lowest value is -2. My lowest value is -2, and I'm going to put a nice open circle here because this -2 is not included. All right, and as I move to the right, I can see the one over here is included. So I'm just going to write that down. I'm going to write it down. It's included right there. And then finally, I go to 5. If I go to 5 right here, okay, and it's an open circle, and it's an open circle over there, right? And so basically, my domain is everything from -2 to 5, but it doesn't include -2 and 5. And even though I have this closed circle over here, it doesn't matter. It's like a smooth transition from -2 to 5. So this one doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to shade everything here because it's included anyways. So it's from -2 to 5. Now, let's look at the range. So if we look over here, the lowest value is 1. And it's an open circle because I'm not going to include it, right? So I'm not going to include that. Now, as I go up, I can see that it's the y's here included, but here is maybe a source of confusion that I'm going to highlight. So you might think that, for example, 3, let's say if I put 3, you might think that because you see an open circle here, this too must be an open circle, but it isn't. Remember, the range means all possible values of y. So even though it's not included for this point, the 3 is included for this point over here. So the value of 3 does exist for this range. So because the value of 3 does exist, we no longer can put that open circle. So I just remove that open circle. So this actually is included. So I'm going to put a closed circle maybe to highlight that. So once again, just to state, even though that for this point, this 5, 3, the 3 is not included, 3 does exist in this function, which is right here. So let's say that was, I don't know, half or something. The y value would be 3. And as long as it's possible in the function, then it's included. So 3 is included. It's very, very important that you understand that. And then as we go along to the top, it's 4, and 4 is included as we've shown over there. So basically, it's everything from 1 to 4. So I'm going to shade that. And the 3 obviously doesn't matter because it's a nice smooth line. So it's from 1 to 4. So let's write out our domain and range. So the domain is x is element of reals, right? And it's from -2 to 5, and it does not include -2 or 5. So it's -2 less than x, which is less than 5, right? So from -2 to 5. Now let's do our range, right? So this is our range. We said it's from 1 to 4, but it does not include 1. It includes 3 and includes 4. So it's a nice smooth line, essentially, from 1 to 4. So here it's y is element of reals because that's the range, and it's from 1. So I'm not going to include 1. I don't need to worry about a 3 because it's a nice smooth transition from 1 to 4 and all the way to 4. But am I going to include 4? Yes, I have to include 4. So it's an equal sign right there. All right, so I hope you understood that example. The next one, I'm going to complicate it a little bit more. So what I'm going to do, it's basically the same thing, but now I have 3 open circles. So one here, one at the maximum there, and one at the end over here. Okay, so once again, let me sort of draw that vertical line and the horizontal line of possibilities just to help me understand my domain and range. So I'm going to draw the horizontal line there, this vertical line here, and let's go. All right, so let's start with this. So for -2, oops, let me draw red. Let's do -2. So -2 is here. I can see that -2 is not included. So this is going to be an open circle. So I'm going to move along. I don't see any breaks. So I'm sort of going to move along here. But then at 1 over here, there's an issue. For the first time ever, we see a little break. So we see an open circle. So in other words, everything is included from -1 to 2, except for -2 to 1, but except for -2 or 1, right? And so all the values exist from here to here, but they don't exist at these 2 points themselves. All right, and then moving along, I can see that it sort of keeps on going, and then it sort of stops at 5. It stops at 5, and right here is an open circle. So looking at these 3, from -2 to 1, it exists right here, and then from 1 to 5, it exists right there. So basically, it's everything from -2 to 1, and then again, because there's a break right here, and then then it exists again from 1 to 5. But remember, it does not include -2, 1, or 5. And I'll show you exactly how to write this in the domain. But first, it's very important to sort of get a visual of the domain itself. Now let's do the range. So we can see that this is 1. So this is 1 right here. And I'm going to put an open circle right here. It's not a negative. You know what? I don't want to confuse you by calling that a -1. So I'm just going to write 1. Okay, I'm just going to write that 1. And I'm going to put an open circle right here because it doesn't include that one. Now, as I go up over here, I can see that this is, say, a 3 over here. Now, you might think, again, just like the previous example, that this is an open circle. But remember, this is a range of possibilities. So even though for this point right here, 3 does not exist, 3 does exist right here. So we're going to call this a closed circle right here. This is definitely a closed circle, not an open. Because remember, the range is all possible. So as long as 3 is possible in the y, we include it. And finally, it caps off at 4. It caps off at 4, but 4 is not included. 4 is not included. So anyways, it's basically going from 1 to 4. It's a nice smooth transition. And since 3 is included, there's no break. So it's basically everything from 1 to 4. So how do we write the domain and range? So let's look at the domain. So the domain is the x. X is an element of reals. And clearly, we have some restrictions here. So let's look at the first restriction. We can see that really there's sort of 2 regions. We have from -2 to 1, and then from 1 to 5, because these open circles sort of create a gap. So for the first one, it's from -2 to 1. So the way I'm going to write it is -2. I'm not going to include that, x, and to 1, right? So that's our first region. This is our first region. And then we have another region right here. And then the second region will be from 1 to 5. So we say or. And it's very important to write the word or. I'll explain that in a second. So it's from 1, x to 5. So the reason why we write or, because for a function, x can only take sort of one value at a time. So it can either be here or it can either be here, but it can't be in both places at the same time, right? So it's sort of, if you write and, it doesn't really make sense. So you need to say or. So the x value can either exist here or here. And so that's your domain. So because of that break in 1, we have to sort of split these 2 regions. Second, the range. So y, what we say again, y is element of reals. And now let's look at the range. So it's from 1. This 3 doesn't matter because it's a nice smooth transition from 1 to 4. So it's really just from 1 to 4, but we don't include 1 or 4. So we say 1 is less than y, which is less than 4. And that's our domain and range for this function. Now, let me do one last one. And really, it's more sort of to see if you understand it. So I'm going to draw something. After I draw the function, what I recommend is pausing the video and seeing if you can determine the domain and range. And once you have done that, then follow along with the video and just check to see if your answers are right. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to draw a function. Again, it's not going to be to scale, so please don't worry about that too much. I'm going to choose a red. So it's basically going to go like this. Okay, it's going to go like that. And then from there to there. Okay. And what's going to happen is that here is going to be an open circle. And here is also going to be an open circle. And the values here, let's put this in blue. So this is 3. This value here is 1. The y value of this open circle, here is going to be 1. The value here, again, I apologize that this is not to scale, but you get the idea. And this is going to be -3. And finally, this is going to be -2. All right. So the question here is, let's determine the domain and range of this one. So once again, before we start, just remember that even though I haven't indicated here it's implied that this is a closed circle here, which means we include the x and y there. So again, pause the video right now, see if you can do this on your own, and then check your answers by playing the video again. All right. So here we go. So first, I'm just going to draw my sort of horizontal line of possibilities. So there we go. And let's start. So the lowest value is -3. and I'm going to include it because, like we said, we include that. I follow along, and I see that there's 1, and there's like this 1 over here, and this is an open circle. So this is an open, so I'm not going to include that. And there's no other value there, so it's a 1. And then I keep going, and I see 3, and I'm going to put an open circle there. And basically, all the values exist from -3 to 1, and then they exist again from 1 to 3. So I'm going to shade that, and then I'm going to shade that, right? And so I'm done with my domain. Now let's look at the range. So the lowest value here is -2. So it's -2. And I'm going to put this as a closed circle. So that's going to be good. I'm going to go here, and you might think that over here, this value of 1 is an open circle. So you might be tempted to draw an open circle. But remember, it exists at another point over here. So because it exists at another point here, that's going to be a closed circle, and that's going to be 1. And then finally, my last value is going to be 4. So that's going to be 4 right there. And basically that's it. So now it's a nice smooth transition from -2 to all the way to 4. So I'm just going to shade that. And there's no breaks in between, unlike over here where there is a break. So let's write down the domain and range. So the domain is x's element of reals. And it's from -3 to 1. So remember, there's a break here because of that. So it's from -3, and I'm going to include the -3 till 1. And then I'm going to write or, and then I'm going to put it from 1, x till 3. And I don't include 1, nor do I include 3. Right? And very important to write or because there's sort of 2 sets. This set right here and this set right here. Now for the range, all right, let's take a look. So y is element of reals, okay? And it's going from -2, and remember, this is already included, so it's really essentially -2 to 4, but I don't include 4. So it's -2 less than or equal to y, which is less than 4, and that's the answer for this example. I'll see you later.